I'm going to talk about how elephants and people live together in one landscape in South India. There are lots of logos out there. The Shola Trust is an organization a few of us started about 10 years ago that works primarily on very on-ground work in the Nilgiris. I'm currently working as a postdoctoral fellow at the National Center for Biological Sciences, and most of this work I'm presenting today is through my PhD at the University of Oxford and the Open University. So bear with me on all those multiple affiliations. So India is a very crowded country. Everyone, I have heard the figure of 1.2 billion people in Africa a couple of times. India is more than that, living in about 1/10 the area. Right? So interactions between elephants and people are much more intense, but there's also a strong cultural tolerance. And what's positive is that we do have half of the world's Asian elephants and more than 2/3 of the world's tigers. So people are able to coexist in ways that are unimaginable in developed country contexts. And that's something important that we need to build on rather than focus primarily on conflict. So I don't use the term conflict at all in my presentation. We talk only about human-elephant interactions. Does this work? Yeah, I had a bit of a technology fail and none of the videos work, so I've cut down from 12 videos to 3. But basically, fences don't really work in India because there's such a density of elephants and people. Elephants being extremely intelligent, they take down fences no matter what you do. And of course, like people mentioned, this is Ali Baba Bashir. He's called Ali Baba because he could open any gate, and he taught everyone around him to follow suit as well. So you can't really keep elephants in to parks no matter what you do. And it's the same with trenches. In high rainfall areas, India is very much more productive than Africa as well, right? The area I'm in, it's about 300 centimeters of rain a year, 3,000 millimeters of rain, which is a lot more than I think most places in Africa get except the central area. But trenches basically fill up in 1 year with a heavy rain, and elephants are able to engineer the sites to go in and out. And they're very agile, much more than you can imagine in terms of how they can get in and out. So the baseline for India is that coexistence is not an option, it's an imperative. Elephants are not going to be kept into protected areas. We have only less than 5% of the landmass protected, and elephants occupy much well beyond that. Only 20% of the elephants' range is within the protected area network. So the context first of particular Gudlu landscape, it's a human-dominated landscape that's surrounded by protected areas. I'm going to run through this quite fast, bear with me. And some areas you can see there's a very hard edge where parks end and where human habitation and agriculture starts, but that one on top is a Google Earth image of Gudlu, and you clearly can't see where forest ends and where human habitation starts. This is the key element of coexistence, right? What is the kind of land use in the area and how fragmented it is, or how kind of patchy and heterogeneous the landscape is. The other key thing is the kind of crops that people grow. Ravi mentioned this in his talk in the morning. Oranges are a good mitigation measure. Here it's basically tea and coffee plantations. The green is natural vegetation, the dark green. The two light greens are either tea or coffee. It's only the yellow when there's any other kind of agriculture. So it's primarily tea and coffee which elephants don't eat. And people don't mind living with elephants as much because there isn't that much conflict over crops really. The other key thing is contested land. The light green is land that forest departments or state governments actually control. The dark green is actual natural vegetation, which the elephants can't tell the difference, of course. So there's a long colonial history and all of that in India, and lots of people fighting over land. So land tenure is not secure at all, and there are huge protests about this regularly, and it's a very volatile situation. People burn forest department jeeps, they chased the forest department into the forest, and they were kind of hiding after some operations. So it's primarily around land, the conflict, but this manifests itself in terms of people protesting when there are problems with elephants. The next is the kind of geography of how people and elephants interact. The green areas are where elephants move through all through the year. Sorry, they don't move through at all. This is from a kind of human risk perspective, the colors. The red areas are where elephants are there all through, and there's a kind of shaded area which is natural cover. The black dots are houses. So we were kind of looking for hotspots geographically where there was lots of elephants, lots of people, and not much cover. But we didn't really find that. It's a much more widespread sort of region where elephants and people are spread out through the entire region. And the key feature is that elephants are expanding their range. That's 2013 to 2018. Over 5 years, elephants have literally taken over a lot more of the landscape and are driving a lot of the decisions at a local level. The next key element, I think Medha talked about this quite a bit, is human diversity and culture in terms of tolerance. I will again just run through some photographs to give you a sense of the place. There are indigenous hunter-gatherer tribes who don't really do agriculture and are by default very tolerant and have lots of knowledge about elephants. There are indigenous settled agriculturists who have some problems with elephants because they practice agriculture, but they also have a lot of tolerance and a long history of knowing how to deal with elephants, who have some problems but not as much. And then there are migrant agriculturists who move into the area who have the most problem. They have no history of living with elephants and they grow crops that elephants like to eat at times. Then there are plantation workers, the whole thing about Sri Lankan Tamilians, Indians who moved to Sri Lanka to work and who moved back, a horrible story of how they were displaced twice and have no country. A lot of them settled in Nilgiris and work on plantations. Their perceptions are very different. And then there are local elites who own these plantations, who again have a very different relationship with elephants. All of this is summarized in the book chapter, but it boils down to ontology. It's not a question of just livelihood or subsistence or what people do. It's what people think elephants are. It's a kind of anthropological approach which I think is very interesting. Elephants could be a species to conserve, they could be a god, they could be a dead demon, they could be another human person. Lots of different things. I won't go into that now. But it's a very deep thing in terms of assessing what people actually believe elephants are, which is really important, I think, to understand for coexistence. And basically, in terms of what people do, this was a study, I'll send you the link if anyone wants it to be published shortly. Different communities are very differently tolerant on how they're willing to put up with elephants and what they actually do to kind of keep elephants off their lands and things like that. The next is diversity. So my abstract is basically about this. The technology field made me kind of take a step back and talk about all the work because this is about elephant behavior and it was all videos that I was planning to use. But basically we started a SMS-based, a web-based system to send out text messages and warn people and learn about where elephants were. This was in 2013 we first started it, took off. So people send in messages if they see elephants and they send warning messages sent back out. Interestingly, we stopped sending the warning messages out shortly because what happened is a huge number of people would congregate to see the elephants rather than move away from there. So it had the opposite effect of what we intended. So very successful project in other parts work, but here it is not like that. Because there are houses everywhere, people are safe. And anywhere they hear about elephants, they all go to see them. They jump back into a house if the elephants turn aggressive. But it was very useful in collecting data about elephants. So we plot on a map where the elephants are and we also ask questions about what the elephant did. So we have a lot of data on elephant interactions with people. This has progressed into a web-based app because data and smartphone proliferation happened very quickly and SMS became obsolete in the last 2 years. The key is you can't take photos with a phone, that's no good. You can just about make out it's an elephant. But you have smartphone, you have bridge cameras that are very cheap and you have OTG card readers. So they plug it, take it from the camera, put it into the OTG card reader onto the phone and send it directly. This works quite well on the field. So the app, this is just the kind of back end of how it works. We went in and talked to people a lot about how to identify individual elephants. That was the focus of our work. Put together this poster. The ears, of course, are key. I think most people who work with elephants know about it. But we worked with them extensively on identifying individuals. It's very easy for the males, particularly Asian elephants, that males all have tusks. And there are some large tuskless males, the key identifiers. A lot harder for the females. It's Rani on top, very distinct tear in her ear, which is easy to notice. The Kotamalai sisters, which are much harder. They look very similar. She's same shape of the ear, same size. Similar body condition. And only think Malaka has a small bump right at the back of her spine, which is the key difference. So for each elephant, we put together photographs like this from both sides and shared this. This seems to come on and off. So yeah, shared this with all the local people and gave elephants names. We attributed personality and all of that, which breaks some of the cardinal rules in biology of not anthropomorphizing. But for us, it was important that people relate to individuals and not the species, because individuals are all very different. I think that's something that we need to really work on a lot more as we understand elephants into the past. Quick 2 points about the elephants in Gudlur, what we found was stark. One is all the populations in South India, the male to female ratio is roughly 1:4. There's a lot less males. Males are poached in India because only the males have tusks. But in Gudlur, we found that the males, there were actually more males than females. So it's a case of a lot of young males. Demography is also shifted towards males and young males. I'm not talking about that now. But it's a case of lots of young males from neighboring forests leaving the natal herds and moving into this urban center, right? A lot like human migration in lots of rural areas. I think the young first to move out. Home range is another key. methods, of course, of home range vary greatly. These are only two elephants that we saw every week. So we are sure that they are only in this landscape, right? If you haven't seen an elephant for a very long time, may have moved somewhere else, because it's based on direct observation. So these two very small home ranges, the female-led herd was 30 square kilometers, and this is 30 kilometers. I've put in all the other complex things, the houses, the tea plantations, the factories, the government schools and hospitals. It's a semi-urban landscape. It's a big highway that goes through, state highway. Elephants are able to live in this landscape in a very small area, 30 square kilometers. I think the key issue is that the little slivers you see are swamps within tea and coffee plantations, and because they fertilize all these plantations, the runoff fertilizes these swamps. We have very productive swamps that are great elephant habitat. There's a video here. Oops. Okay, it's working. So this is a video about 7 minutes, I think, about the elephants in particular and personalities. That will just go through the video, I think, rather than me talk about it. Globally, it's assumed that whenever people and elephants share space, they're in a constant state of conflict. Human-elephant conflict is a big thing. But in a plantation landscape like Gudlur, it's largely tea and coffee which elephants don't eat. We know this is not the case. It's about 500 square kilometers in area. There are 150 elephants and 250,000 people living relatively peacefully. The Gudlur Elephant Monitoring Project started in 2015 to better understand the diversity in the elephants, to understand the different elephant personalities perhaps in this region and how they were all different from each other in terms of how they interact with people.
In this project we are doing for last 3 years. We have photographed around 150 elephants in our landscape, and we profiled around 90 elephants till now. So whenever we see elephants in the field, we will take photograph for each sides of an individual elephant. Ears are the main key feature for us to identify, because all the ears shape won't be the same. And also, other than tusk and ears, we will look around the body shapes, and also if possible we will look around the tails also. Whenever we see an elephant, not only taking a photograph, we used to observe him from starting to end. Like each time we take notes of what each elephants are doing. Even the calves or even the tusker in the herd, we observe what they are doing. And not only elephants, we will observe what the people reaction, and also what's the elephant reaction towards the people also.
First, the elephants that we see very few times in the year, they're kind of transient. They move through the landscape but are not resident in Gudlur. The second are elephants that we see regularly. So they are resident, but they are shy and they never come near human habitation. Third are kind of what we call brash youngsters. They come near human habitation, come into towns a lot, but they are not comfortable around people, and they exhibit the standard physiological response of fight or flight. They either charge at people and attack, or they run away. And the fourth are perhaps the most interesting, are highly habituated older males, that they don't do anything, no matter what people do and how much people throw firecrackers at them, beat drums, chase them on with vehicles. They're just not frazzled at all. They never attack the people and they never run away or go away from them. So what we found in Gullur is that the transient elephants that are moving through are not resident. The resident but shy elephants that don't come near people, these constitute 80% of the population. And these aren't really causing any trouble for people, they're not interacting with people. It's the 10% brash youngsters that are actually doing all the damage. Even the 10% of highly habituated males, they learn not to attack people and there is very minimal damage from them. Our local celebrity elephant Ganeshan is a very good example of this peaceful coexistence. For 3 years we tracked him and he never really went into intact forest. He spent all his time almost entirely among people. He was routinely seen sleeping by the side of the roads, pushing into buses and breaking the windshield, knocking autos over, drinking water from people's tanks. Always followed by like a whole lot of people who were his fan following. So he's learned over these last 9 years or so that people don't actually pose a threat because it's only noise that they make. They don't actually attack him or injure him in any way. When there is conflict with people, there is invariably demand to capture the elephants, and very often it's the wrong elephants. Because people know these highly habituated males very well, they always demand that those are the ones that should be captured because they create in trouble. But in reality, we have found that those are not the elephants creating trouble. With 80% of elephant home range in India outside protected areas, there is an urgent need to understand this space better and the elephants in terms of how they are different from each other. Not all elephants are the same and there is no one solution for problems with elephants. So, quick final conclusions. So the first thing is, in terms of comparing coexistence with elephants, we really need to look at a great number of things, and no two landscapes are the same. So solutions, I think Ravi mentioned this, in one place are not the same as solutions in another place, and places are so varied. I mean, the Botswana coexistence project, for example, interacted with them at Oxford a few years ago. Botswana has 4 people per square kilometer, right? India has 450. So it's really, you can't make any reasonable comparisons between these two spaces, they're just completely different. So understanding the distribution of people, the density, the land use, all of that is vitally important to start any of these initiatives around coexistence. The diversity in people and human cultures is critically important. All humans have different histories and relationships with elephants, and understanding that and building on that is really important. And diversity in behavior, as you showed, is also critical. Basically, staff used to spend all their time chasing these highly habituated individuals, but we just flipped that to don't chase these individuals, it's pointless, just watch them. Their life suddenly became so much more easier, and we don't present this, but human deaths were about 10 every year when we started the work. It's fallen to about 3. The last 3 years been 3.5, the average number of people who get killed every year. So there is a significant drop in human mortality that's caused by multiple factors. We don't attribute it to ourselves in our work. But this monitoring of elephants and kind of working with elephants, not aggressively, is really important. That was basically it. I just have a few kind of outward-looking points I want to talk about. Projects that I'm involved with now. There's an Asian elephant genomic. This is the last thing, 30 seconds. Okay. Just put that up there and we'll talk about it later maybe. But there are Lantana elephants. traveling around the world. There are elephants made out of lantana that help people. But get in touch if anyone's interested, and I will get in touch as well. Thanks. Sorry, Sarah.